My name is Danny Peralta. I'm the managing director at Foco. Very pleased to have everybody here today. This is a very momentous occasion, let's say, historically and culturally, to say the least. Before we get on, I want to just do a quick intro to what we're going to experience today. This is going to be an amazing conversation. We have four, I'm going to say, illustrious artists, luminaries in the world of photography and art. And they're going to speak a little bit today, their story. They're going to tell us some stories. They're going to be in dialogue today on some of the amazing accomplishments they've had, including some of the organizations that they worked with and started, some of the legacy as their own as artists. And we're going to dig a little bit into how they supported each other as one of the basis of their work, right? Very, very important that we talk about that. And this is also a part of this exhibit. We have this wonderful exhibit. I want to give a shout out to Kay and Oscar and the team for helping put this together. We have a great exhibit today here with Kim's gallery, the landmark gallery here today, Resistance for Freedom. I just want to kind of read this out real quick. It highlights the efforts of artists, again, of color, who have been working within our communities to push back against injustice while building networks, communities, and platforms via the arts. They have held space for several generations of individuals to express and defend their right to exist fully creative lives. Today we're joined by Lenore Brown,
yes.
Salimah Ali, excuse me, say it properly, Mr. Ed Sherman, and George Malave. And again, they're gonna share their story, and this is part of the thread between this exhibit here. Again, please take some time to see it today. We're also gonna take a walk this afternoon to Children's Art Carnival and see the rest of the exhibit. But this is part of this larger narrative, right, of resistance work via the arts, right? Larger narrative of people coming together, right, to create what doesn't exist, right? Bringing people together in new ways. And then the legacy of that, right? How did Foco get here, right? Never alone. We talked about that a little bit this week. How did we all kind of get, not only to how Foco's been here for almost 50 years, but Children's Art Carnival. We're going to learn a bit about NCANY today as well, right? And some of these other amazing groups that have been working and supporting artists along the way with us as well. So I'm going to stop talking, because I've said a lot, and I'm just going to do a quick introduction of the panelists so that we can ground themselves here, and then we're going to just start this conversation, all right? So let me just give you a little breakdown, little introduction to Salimah Ali, whose work has been included in numerous galleries and museum exhibitions at the Studio Museum of Harlem, the Brooklyn Museum of the Arts, Jamaica Arts Center for the Arts and Living, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in their permanent collection, as well as Aperture Gallery. She is the winner of the first Shinhin Shabablo, right? I'm sorry, I don't want to mess up names. Photography Award in London. And since 2005, Salimah has been a member of the Kamiongi Incorporated, right? The historic collective of African-American photographers that were established in 1963. It's amazing. So please check that out. Welcome, Salimah.
Thank you.
Lenore, a native New Yorker and photographer, a resident of Harlem. She's continued to document the neighborhood as it has evolved. Her photographs, printed in the darkroom, have been exhibited in solo and group shows in New York and Harlem, Columbia University, the Barry Russ Medical Centers, CUNY, Symphony Space, Pen and Brush, the public libraries, the Lenox Social, Rio Gallery too, and most recently in the Northern Manhattan Art Show. Lenore is one of the founding photographers of the Hamilton Heights Darkroom at the Children's Art Carnival. Welcome, keeping the black and white photography alive. George Malave studied in the Germain School of Photography and the Educational Alliance Photo Workshop under Dr. Al Freed, where he earned a degree in photography from SUNY. He has himself taught photography and lectured at various educational institutions, and he was awarded the Creative Artist Public Service Fellowship to study street life in New York, as well as a National Endowment for the Art survey grant to photograph New York's financial district. Amazing photographer and mentor to many. Welcome, George. And then last but not least, Ed Sherman, who has been photographing since he was 14, according to this. I heard 13 earlier this week, but that's amazing, right?
Still working at it.
And he's still working at it, still learning. Ed has built his photographic foundation through the interaction, again, in collaboration with many artists and photography friends and colleagues. His groundbreaking work includes undergraduate fine arts at Brooklyn College, photographic course studies in the New School for Social Research, and he is a former U.S. Marine Corps photographer. He has worked as a videographer and editor for the NBC WNIT in Albany, New York, which helped shape his visual storytelling. And again, one of the founding members, one of the important members of the NCA, the National Congress of the Artists. Welcome, Ed, as well. Cool. So, one thing I will say, if you guys can speak up a little bit, I have a microphone, I'm trying to record it, but I definitely want to make sure that we get the sound right. And I know we have sometimes some sound leaks. Let's make sure we can speak up a little bit. But I guess the first question I want to start with is maybe you guys can introduce yourselves again, take a couple of minutes, maybe talk a little bit about, in as fast as you can, I guess, in the best way possible, how you got here today, right? Maybe talk a little bit about your work as artists, definitely the context. How did you guys get to not only become artists, but also leaders in the field, and what kind of helped shape that? So I'm gonna start with you, George, because you're sitting right here, and maybe we can start with you.
Okay, I started out as wanting to be a painter. So as a child, I was always involved in the visual arts. I had a friend who had a darkroom, took me down to see how a print was made, and magic. I said, I want to learn this. So I went and I found a school that I started with for maybe 5 years or so. And then I got involved with, I had an exhibit at the gallery that the school had, and I got a call from Charles Biasini that he was forming this group in Foco. And he wanted to meet. So we got together in, I think it's Roger Caban's or Phil Dante's apartment, and we discussed what they were trying to do. And I said, wow, this is something that is dear to my heart. And basically it's just gathering photographers who have not had the opportunity to exhibit or to have their work published, and come together, collaborate in forming exhibits. And by doing that, we were able to do that. They were able to get grants, and little by little it grew, so that we started gathering more and more artists who were independent. There were very few galleries at the time. The only ones I can remember was Underground Gallery on 10th Street and the Alternative Museum run by Gino Rodriguez. Gino Rodriguez was one of the instigators for the Dos Mundos show, which brought us together as we were all working independently. And that show was at the Huntington Hartford Gallery on Columbus Circle. That was a major show in that we all met, and for many of us, have stayed friends. And that was an inspirational event. And I think it's very important that we work as in collaboration with others. You know, working by yourself is time consuming. You can't do what you can when you work in a group. It's like having multiple minds working on a problem. So that I always try to instill in people not to be afraid to collaborate. That collaborating is not giving yourself away somehow. It's really building on them. It's taking other people's experiences and incorporate it into your way of seeing things. So I find that in Foco has done that and continues to do that today, you know, through its exhibits, through its publications, and now through its archives, which are our historical record of who we were then and how we developed. And it introduced us to other people, other photographers, working in other countries, and our vision expanded as we did that. You know, so the importance of archives and importance of Foco, I can't underestimate.
Thank you, yeah, very true.
Wow.
Before I say anything about where I've been, where I'm going, I just want to acknowledge two people that are sitting in this space. Michael Unthank, who is the director of the Children's Art Carnival that was already mentioned. Matter of fact, the Children's Art Carnival was founded by an NCA member, Betty Blayton Taylor. And Kim Hamilton, who we're sitting in her gallery, who is also NCA. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I grew up in the Lincoln Center area you know where Lincoln Center is, right? In New York. Well, before it was Lincoln Center, it was Johnny's Candy Store, LeGray's Bar, Mr. Kelly's Grocery Store. There were tenement houses along Amsterdam Avenue that were torn down to make Lincoln Center. That's where I grew up. It was called, that area was called San Juan Hill, okay? We're just north of Hell's Kitchen. And growing up there was an experience. Thelonious Monk lived down the block, okay? And my friends and I were into photography, like you said, since I was 13. So that collaboration note, very important during this time for me. There were about 8 or 10 of us, young men, teenagers, that were into photography, into music, into 13 years old, we're listening to jazz. We're listening to rock and roll, R&B, but we're listening to Thelonious Monk too, okay? And one of my friend's uncles, his name was Prince Davis, and he was the president of the camera club at Baruch College. So he mentored us. He had us in the dark room at Baruch College when we were 13, 14 years old, printing. I say I'm a photographer, but I'm also a printer. And printing has been very important to my photography. I've been in some of the leading photo studios, photo finishing studios in the city. Those of you that are from the analog and remember Modern Age? Well, I worked at Modern Age. I worked at K&L. K&L was Kirsch and Lang. I worked there when they were doing color, printing and C-prints, dye transfers, internigs, and things of that nature. And so the technical side of photography was always important to me. I remember a book that I read over and over and over again for years. And it's called Pre-Visualization and the Zone System. You know it? Pre-visualization and the zone system. And they give Ansel Adams the credit for it, but he didn't develop the system, he codified the system. And what that means is that knowing your materials, knowing your equipment, that you pre-visualize in your mind before you click the shutter. Pre-visualization. So this is what my friends and I were dealing with back then. I got involved with photography through my mother. There's a YMCA on 63rd Street in Central Park West. Right in there, walking distance from the apartment. Matter of fact, that's where I learned to swim. But my mother was into art. My mother was into a lot of things. But she was drawing, and she went to the Y for some drawing lessons. Then she started taking photography there. And she came home with the stainless steel developing tank, chemicals, and I got into it. So I'm in the closet, dealing with this stainless steel tank and in the bathroom developing film. And then my parents bought me an enlarger. So my bedroom became a dark room. 14 years old, I was concerned with printing. My friends were concerned with printing. Matter of fact, another one of my friends had an enlarger set up in his bedroom. So that's how I got involved with photography. Just to pass it on, I want to mention somebody. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was supposed to go to Vietnam as a recon photographer. I went in December 1965. They sent me down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And while I was there, I was in the photo unit. And I worked under a Master Sergeant Raymond Lowry. Remember this name? Raymond Lowry. And the reason I mention him is because working under him, I never knew until I got out of the Marine Corps what a significant photographer he was. One of the icons of the United States Marine Corps is the flag raising on Iwo Jima. You've seen the sculpture and whatnot. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps at that time, Raymond Lowry. He went up and photographed that flag raising. That photograph was taken twice. He was the first one to photograph the flag raising on Iwo Jima. When he came down the hill, the other photographer was coming up the hill. And he told him, hey, it's a good shot, young kid. And what they did was, the first photographic setup, the flag was too small. It was too small for the boats out in the water to see the flag raising. So they raised the flag twice with a larger flag. And I just want to mention Raymond Lowry because he was such a significant photographer in the history of the United States Marine Corps. So I'm going to pass it on. We got plenty of stories.
Okay. I want to thank everyone here for coming first. That means a lot because the support is everything. But I would like to say my career in photography, it really started with me writing in poetry. I started writing poetry when I was in school, in high school, and then my father gave me a camera. And it was at that time, it was all analog, basically Polaroid type film. The cameras that you look down into, you take the pictures and you pull the Polaroid out the camera and you peel it. So with that camera, I did a lot of family photographs. And my pop is from Baltimore, Maryland. So we would get the family all together and take photographs. I mean, I have a photograph with family from here to there. And from there, we lived in Brooklyn. I was born in Harlem Hospital. Moved to Brooklyn to Gowanus Projects. And then from there, moved to 40 Projects where my photography really took off, where I was photographing the neighborhood kids, the men and the women in the neighborhood. And they would like, oh, Salimah, where's your camera? If I stepped out the door without my camera, or where's your camera? Take my picture. So imagery and photography is very important to people because that's the only memory that they have to remember. When you take a photograph, you get it printed, you give to them. And that's a memory that they have. From there, I got tired of photographing the neighborhood. So I would venture out to Brooklyn, and then I became interested in entertainment photography. And I spent 10 years doing that. I entered into LaGuardia Community College and remember seeing a flyer on the table for a concert with Eddie Kendricks. And I was like, I want to photograph him. And that's when it was only analog film, black and white film. And I was able to contact the promoter of that, who was giving the concert in Morton Hall. And I was like, well, can I come in and photograph Eddie Kendricks? He was like, sure. So from there, every time he gave a concert, I was there. And I wasn't only in the front stage, I was able to get photographs backstage of some of these entertainers and realize that they're people just like us. You know, they have their issues and everything. But I'm basically a photojournalist. I love being out in the street photographing different moments in time. So I'm gonna pass it to you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Lenore Brown, and let's see, I guess I started out photography as a kid. I always used to get like the latest like Kodak Instamatic, you know, and I would take pictures of my family, things like that. And then when I graduated from high school, I bought myself a 35mm camera and just figured out, you know, tried to figure out how to use it myself. Later, my brother had built a darkroom in his closet, and he had a bathroom nearby. So that's when I first experienced printing in a darkroom film. It wasn't extensive. I'm a native New Yorker, so I was going to school in Boston, and that's when my brother was in Boston. So I came back to New York after completing undergrad, and I went to Columbia Law School. So I did that, and that was my career. That's what I was doing. I was a lawyer for many years. But photography was always an interest of mine, and black and white for sure. I became aware of, I started to take a class at the New School, and that's when I learned about the Educational Alliance, and because they had a black and white printing setup and classes and things like that. So I started to take classes at the Educational Alliance until they had decided to renovate their building, changed their art school around. So I mean, it was a rehab, and they weren't going to bring back the darkroom. So I had inquired about what they were going to do with the equipment, and I learned that they were going to donate their equipment to an organization in Sri Lanka. And I said, Sri Lanka? I know places. I know a place in Harlem. Use the equipment. I'd love to use it. So it took some lobbying, and it wasn't until the last moment that they had changed their mind and decided that, you know, they were going to leave the equipment here in the States, in New York. But so I contacted Michael Onthink, and I said, look, I have an opportunity to get some darkroom equipment. And Michael was gracious enough to say, you know, you could store it, you could use it. And I was aware of the Children's Art Carnival. I live in the neighborhood. I was very much aware of the Children's Art Carnival. So the group of photographers, actually under the tutelage of Michael Mazziosi, decided that we would renovate the darkroom and build and expand it. So that's what we did. It was an undertaking about maybe about a 2-year undertaking, 1.5 years, 2 years undertaking. So we converted what was a children's darkroom that could accommodate maybe 2 or 3 enlargements, 1 sink and 1 door. So we created, we expanded it and we put in 2 sinks and a revolving door. So that could accommodate more than, 1 or 2 people in the darkroom. And from there, we, continued to classes, and we always participated in the uptown strolls with the Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance. We created an Instagram account, a website, and we're always looking for people to come into the darkroom. So I look forward to this. I'm happy to be here to open the darkroom to information about the darkroom to others, and welcome you to join us later after the program during the open house at Children's Art Carnival. My work was basically about Harlem and how it was changing, and I developed a body of work using black and white printing and how it was changing over the time. I started I think my first exhibit was in 2010 at Columbia University, and I just expanded on that. And I've exhibited with NCA. Ed was one of the curators, and the show was at Kinkelaba. And I think you had mentioned some of the other exhibits that I was in. So it was a learning process about how to show your work, how to get grants, to get funds to develop the work, it's expensive, the materials are expensive, so that was one thing, and writing grants, so I kind of did a lot at one time in a short period of time. Since 2010 was my first exhibit, 29. I was part of the Harlem Arts Alliance, National Conference of Artists. There was a group of photographers from the Harlem Arts Alliance. We created the Visionaries, and our work is in Harlem Hospital, in some of the key departments there. So that's it in a nutshell, and it's been a great journey, and I look forward to continuing.
Excellent. I think you guys hinted a little bit about some of the context, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges of coming up as photographers. We can talk a little bit about that a little bit. There's some of the organizations you guys have founded, some of the, alliances amongst, your cohorts, and maybe some of the context, like what was happening when you guys were developing these opportunities, some of these alliances? What are some of the challenges? I know we've spoken. I'm going to actually have you speak a little bit first on that, because you mentioned a very unique challenge, right, to you as a photographer.
Yes.
And I want you to start with that. Yeah, like.
So my challenges as a photographer, coming up in the 70s and the 80s, there were not many women photographers. So I kind of had to fight to have a place, as they say, at the table, to be able to exhibit, to be able to travel around to see different art. Because during the 70s and the 80s, women were really getting into the art of photography and art itself. There weren't many grants around. There weren't many opportunities around. So my mentors were basically men that I came in contact with photography. And one of my mentors was a guy by the name of Jerry Black. He's no longer here, he passed this year. Mm-hmm. But he educated me on doing studio photography, doing portraits, doing babies. I I didn't even know what a cotillion was. He said, "You want to do a cotillion?" I'm like, "What's that?" You know? And he introduced me to that, how to, photograph different things. There's so many different areas in photography to do. Weddings, photojournalism, babies, what have you. But I chose photojournalism because for me, being amongst people, learning their culture, learning how they live, learning just their day-to-day life, and being able to put that in a photograph that speaks to your audience, a photograph that people look at and say, "Oh, wow." I was able to do that with the help of my mentor and one of my college professors, Jim Collier. He also was one to say, do it right the first time. I remember being in the dark room and we had to photograph this white on white. So you have to separate the white on white. I had 10 sheets of paper. He had me to print. I got it on the 10th sheet of paper. I was like wiping the sweat off of my head. But, the challenges was, I was in a field full of men. And a lot of them did not want to give up information, but there were a few that did. And, I'm happy for that.
I have to say something to that. Because Salimah and I have a mutual friend that's a prime example of how things change. She's a black woman, she's a photographer, and her name is Sharon Farmer.
Oh, yes.
And Sharon Farmer
Yes.
was the chief photographer at the White House under Bill Clinton. The chief photographer at the White House.
Yes. The first.
Didn't drop with that one. I didn't know. It's very, very important. I'm glad you're bringing these names in to the room.
And there's another woman photographer, Michelle Agans, of the New York Times. I remember she was the photographer for one of the mayors in Chicago. And she would go back and forth until he hired her. Because they did not see a woman as being an artist or a photographer. I remember one of the concerts I did with Teddy Pendergrass. I have a photograph of him sitting in his pajamas in his room. And I remember being at the door and the bodyguards letting in all the men. And I'm like, I'm a photographer too, I gotta go in. I said, there's nothing that I have not seen. So eventually they let me in, and Teddy Pendergrass was nice enough to come out, sit for me while I took a photograph, and that appeared in one of the magazines.
Any other examples, I guess you could say, of some of the challenges at the time that you were facing when you were trying to be a photographer, a working artist?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that photography does is to help you to clarify your values. What you do as a photographer is to select part of life and spend your life energy in recording it. That is a way of saying to you, this is something that has some meaning to me. This is something that stirs me inside enough for me to take a picture and then print it and then show it. So photography is a wonderful way of looking at your core values and then using the image to bring them out. Quite often we don't know what they are. You know, we sort of fumble around, but if you look at the things that you love doing, the things that you love to read, the things that you love to listen to, the people that you gravitate to, all of these things are things that have an inner value for you. And those are the things that should direct how you live your life. You know, what are you going to spend your life photographing and why? And photography is a way of finding the questions and then trying to answer those visually. And then along the way, you're always meeting mentors. I've had many, many mentors. One of the great mentors was at the Educational Alliance was Dr. Freed. He was an optometrist. He taught the art of photography. I remember going to him and saying, I want to take your class. He looked at my work and he said, no, you're not ready. That always had an impact on me because that was the first time someone said, no, you need more information. So I said, what do I need to do? He said, technically, you're not ready. So go and learn the techniques. So I went to the Germain School of Photography, and I spent 1.5 years printing color, black and white, processing. I came back to the school, and he said, okay, you're ready. And one of the first assignments he gave the class was photograph a Beethoven symphony. I said, what? Another one was photograph intimations of immortality. And I'm dumbfounded. But what he did was to use photography to answer questions for yourself about life. And then he introduced us to books, to films, to exhibits, and he became a sort of a father figure in that he used the classroom to help you grow. You know, it was a sort of a selfless act of giving what he's learned and passing it on. And I think that's what we all do as photographers. You know, we look at the world and say, look at this, and look at this, look at that. And by doing that, we help each other grow. We help each other see a little further, feel a little deeper. And so that artists, I think, are treasures.
There was a black woman in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. Her name was Madam C.J. Walker.
Yes.
Okay. She was a millionaire. The issues that the artists from the Harlem Renaissance had to overcome were the same issues that the artists from the Black Power movement had to overcome. Are the same issues that we have to overcome right now. And that's one, having allies with a power base to support the arts and culture of your community. And so, if you think about it, our artists, whether they were painters or sculptors or photographers or what have you, didn't have access to museums and galleries. We showed our work in alternate spaces. That's where I first saw your work. I first saw your work at the Uptown Chamber of Commerce.
It was the Arts Alliance, no?
In their office.
Okay, the office.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it was the office.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what Madam C.J. Walker was doing was she had a brownstone. Her brownstone was next door to the County Cullen Library on 136th Street, where it is right now, right? County Cullen. We're in Harlem, folk. I was born in Harlem. I'm a Harlem boy, born in Sydenham Hospital. County Cullen was my father's English teacher. So, the challenges then are the same challenges now. Having access to power. So when you're talking about you want to be a photographer, but you can't get a job. You want to be a photographer, but no one's going to show you work. You want to be a photographer, but you don't have access to different places where you want to photograph. So that was just a sidebar. I want to mention a photographer. I had an art gallery in Harlem in the 70s, Benin Gallery. It was on 7th Avenue between 138th and 139th. Why was it there? It was there because I knew the real estate man that had access to the space. Now, how did I have access to him? Because I bought a brownstone in Strivers Road, and he was the real estate man, and he liked me and my family. And he said, Ed, why don't you get your salesman's license to sell real estate? I wasn't interested in that, but money has never been a motivator for me. Even right now. That's not that I don't respect it and what it can do, because I do, okay? But it's never been my motivator, especially with my photography. So there was a Chinese restaurant on 7th Avenue, and I'd walk by that Chinese restaurant and look in, and street level, nice spot. I said, damn, this would make a nice art gallery. And I'd look in there, and I'd always see the Chinese man sitting at a table in the restaurant all by himself. Time's passing. Then one day I went by, and there was a sign in the window. It said, closed by the health department. So I know why he was sitting in there by himself. And I went to Mr. Jackson and I said, Mr. Jackson, who's controlling that space? I'd like to make an art gallery out of the space. And he said, I am. He says, you want it? You got it. I made an art gallery out of that. Let me just say. I curated an exhibition with Dawood Bey, Frank Stewart, Jean Matusameh, and Dawood Bey, Jean Matusameh. One other. I mentioned Jeannie Matusameh because we were talking about black women. Do you know who that is? Jeannie Matusameh was a photographer. Well, she worked for NBC. She was on an assignment to cover Arthur Ashe. Next flip, boom, boom, Jeannie and Arthur Ashe got married. Okay. So, Frank Stewart. Frank Stewart is the photographer for Jazz at Lincoln Center. Dawood Bey, yes. He blew up. He was teaching in Chicago, exhibiting all over and so on. I curated them as a group exhibition in that community gallery in the 70s. Then a photographer that had a major impact on my life, Roy DeCarava. Going back to San Juan Hill and me and my friends doing photography together. So I looked in this book, and it's a book on international photographers put out by the Museum of Modern Art called Family of Man. So I'm going through the book because I want to see, because you know, next to the photographers, they tell you the country. And I want to see, well, let me see who's in there from the USA. And now I want to see who's black from the USA. And it was Roy DeCarava and Hugh Bell. Little would I know that those two photographers, I was looking at those books when I was 13 and 14 and 15 and whatnot, being inspired that way I would grow up and they would be friends of mine. Inspiring me. Now, I went to Brooklyn College. I was one of the oldest guys in the class because I got out the Marine Corps, went back to school, went to fine arts in Brooklyn College. The VA was going to pay for it, and get a stipend too. So I said, okay. But I was already involved with everything else, but I said, oh, all right. I took a history of photography. The photographer that was teaching the course was commuting from Philadelphia. And he gave an assignment. He said, I want you to write about a photographer from history, because he's a history of photography. So, you know, let's go Ansel Adams, or let's go. So I said, all right. So I said, I'm going to write about Roy DeCarava. So he said, oh, Roy DeCarava, oh. And he loved Roy's work. A lot of people love Roy's work. So I go to Roy's house, and I say, Roy, I got a school assignment, and I want to write about you. He said, write about me? He said, I'll tell you what, I'll go to school with you. Roy DeCarava and his wife went to Brooklyn College to my classroom, and Roy spoke in the classroom.
You got a name.
Huh?
You got a name.
Yeah, baby. The teacher loved it. Loved it. Roy is an inspiration to me. Then, when I opened that art gallery, for me to curate a Roy DeCarava exhibition in that one little community gallery was like, oh my God. And Roy, at the time, he was doing a project with a museum in Houston or something like that, but made time and everything to show in that community gallery. Roy DeCarava. To me, he's the dean of black photographers. No disrespect to Gordon Parks.
You know, I guess the question I would have, and maybe you guys want to also follow up a little bit on that, but I think you mentioned a little bit now, you told an amazing story. The mentorships, the one-on-one relationships. But before we get into that, NCA, we have to speak about NCA. We are here today. I need to hear that. Folks need to hear that. Please, a little something.
I'd love to tell you about NCA. I love NCA, National Conference of Artists. National Conference of Artists is the oldest African-American visual arts organization in this country. Founded in 1959, the group of artists, art educators, and art supporters met in Washington, D.C. at Atlanta University 1959, and conceived this organization. One of the founding members and heads, Dr. Margaret Burroughs. Dr. Margaret Burroughs is also not only the founder of the National Conference of Artists, but the founder of the DuSable Museum in Chicago, the founding member of the African American Museum Association, the founder of Southside Community Center in Chicago, who to this day, hopefully they're still going on, but I know when I was there last, one of the surviving community art galleries, museum type spaces from the WPA. Okay? Southside Community Center in Chicago. The other one is Caramoo House in Cleveland. Okay? You need to know these because this is when we were not selling art, weren't showing art, weren't known as artists. These are the people that lifted us up. Lifted us up. So, Dr. Margaret Burroughs, matter of fact, Southside Community Center started in her kitchen. Most of the photographers and visual artists, whether they be Inga Hardison. Inga Hardison was an NCANY artist. She was a photographer. She was a sculptress based in Harlem. We celebrated her 100th birthday before she passed. NCA. She was. I love NCA. Okay. Jeff Donaldson, chair of the art department at Howard University. NCA. We went to Nigeria for Festac 77. Jeff Donaldson and R.C. Davis were the heads, directors of the North American Zone. Keep in mind, do you know about Festac? Y'all know? Okay. 1977, Festac was the largest international arts and cultural gathering of people from the diaspora. When I was there, I was meeting people from Australia, Cuba, Senegal, okay, so we're looking at an arts festival that featured not only the arts, but intellectual thought. So they had a colloquium. So you had PhDs from all over the world and talking about issues that affected the African diaspora. Okay. NCA. The major historically black colleges in this country, in the art departments, you will find NCA. Chairs of the department, or what have you, whether it was in New Orleans, whether it's in California, Chicago, wherever, you'll find NCA. There's a colloquium that goes on at Howard University, the Porter colloquium. You need to know, and you should go. It happens every year, the colloquium. James Porter, NCA. James Porter was the chair of the art department at Howard University back when, and he was a painter also. And if you get his book, you will see that he was writing about technical aspects of painting way before a whole lot of people's names that you would mention. Dr. David Driscoll, you know Dr. David Driscoll? Yeah. NCA. Last time I saw Dr. David Driscoll was about 2019 in New Orleans. when we got together. And Dr. David Driscoll said at that time, he was the last surviving founding member of the National Conference of Artists. Inspirational. NCA. I love NCA. NCA, we have had international gathering in Senegal, Toronto, Bahia, and then various states in the States here. If you go to Senegal and you go to that door of no return, y'all heard about it, you're going to see a plaque at Gorée Island. There's only one plaque in Gorée Island, and it's NCA.
So I want to segue into one of the organizations that I'm in is Kamange. And that organization started in 1963 because there was a need for African American photographers to photograph us, to see a vision through our eyes. And our mission in Kamange is to document and preserve the history, culture of the African diaspora with integrity and insight for humanity through the lens of the Black photographer. Because early history, it wasn't people of color photographing us. You know, they would come in our community, photograph us, and it would be negative images. And Kamange started so that we could start showing positive images of the Black community, of people of color community, instead of the images of being arrested or the drug addict in the street. We wanted to show family life. We wanted to show kids being happy. So Kamange started because the photographers in that group at that time, I came in 2005, but it started in 1963, wanted to show the positivity of our Black community.
It's amazing. Platforms, right? Ownership, right? Of our stories, our narrative, are very key. I want to give. I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, I want to make sure that everybody has. Yes, please add.
Just
100%.
a comment. One of the things I wanted to do when I first developed a body of work was, and I received a grant for it, and I had proposed that I would show my work at the public libraries at the Harlem branches. And so that, so my exhibit was just my work, and it showed at Hamilton Grange, County Cullen, and George Bruce Library. And I thought that, you know, that was my vision of what I saw when I took pictures of Harlem, and of course positive images, but the community of Harlem. And I thought that people should see it. They can come to the library and see it. They don't have to go to the Met or MoMA. Anybody who comes to the library could see that work. And so that was one of the visions I had, just with my little work, but you know, just to share the art with the community. So
I think it's very important for our children and our community to see positive images, because you know, if you keep feeding someone negativity, that's how they're going to live. Just like the music, just like rap music, it started out positive, and then it got, you know, very raw, as I want to say. I don't want to curse, but the music changed, just like photography has changed from, say, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, showing, you know, different images throughout time.
Any, I know, well, I want to do two things. I want to be mindful of the time. I would love to maybe open up the floor. Folks have questions. I know we've heard a lot. I know I've been inspired. I have some questions myself, but I wanted to maybe open it up to the audience. So we have some folks here. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask?
I have a question.
Yes, please, yeah.
Do you ever have an opportunity to display your work, you know, your positive images in schools at different levels? So the kids can get an idea of the culture around them?
I haven't exhibited in any schools. I've taught photography with Jamaica Art Center for about 10 years, and the assignments that I would give the kids would be assignments so that they could see something as simple as go out and photograph the tree. So you have 10 kids is gonna photograph that tree differently. They're gonna see it differently. I may say go out in the street and photograph the concrete street. And people are like, the kids are like, concrete street? But there is art in the concrete street. You have to use your mind to create an image that relates to what you are feeling in that photograph. So.
Definitely some engagements with young people.
Yes.
Always
yes.
teaching, always teaching.
Always teaching the young people. Even today I see like young women photographers in the street, you know. I introduce them to different organizations that have women photographers, you know, because they don't know. Like when I was coming into the world of photography, I didn't have that information. There weren't a lot of organizations. There weren't a lot of grants that I knew of. So whenever I get an opportunity, I try to teach, I try to mentor the young female photographers.
Any other questions?
Don't be shy.
Audience? Yeah, I mean, you guys have some of the most brilliant minds in photography in the room. Please don't be shy.
We probably have over 50 or more decades amongst us,
You know?
in the photography field.
One of the things, oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I just a quick question. You know, you have all of this information and all of this knowledge, and a lot of times it's not in one space or someone like a website where we could all go to and say, oh, these are the things that I can take advantage of. You know, like all of those websites that give you the compilation of what's going on in the city and that type of stuff. Do we have anything like that?
We have in Foco.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And Foco is,
And you guys are doing great. But maybe I missed some stuff on the website. But I mean, not just for in Foco, but for other organizations as well, where they can all go.
There are many different organizations. I think one of the things is that you have to follow the artist that you're interested in, because in following that artist have information either on their website or their history in photography, and information that you know, you could look into.
But the Foco archives, amazing. Please take some time to go on the website. Well, I think we have a link to that. And we actually have some issues in the back if you want to check out from some of the historical issues that we have that speak exactly to that are a repository for that information. And hopefully we can do more of that work and help model how others can do it as well. That's very important as well. Definitely. Thank you for that question.
I'd just like to invite anyone who wants to see the dark room. It's the Hamilton Heights Dark Room, and it's located at Children's Art Carnival, and they're having an opening of Foco's work as well. I think it's open studio now through 6 o'clock, and the dark room will be open around, I think, about now until 6. So anyone who's interested in seeing it and learning more are welcome.
You know, the same way there are art movements like Cubism, Surrealism, Dada, The same way you have these art movements, you have the Black Power movement that generated a certain type of art. Okay, so you have We Artist Collective, which I'm very proud to be a member of here in Harlem. Then you had Afro Cobra coming out of Chicago. Then you joined in 1963, coming out of Harlem with Romad Bearden and a cadre of very famous painters. You had Spiral Art Collective. Then you had Cinque Gallery. You have now one. Y'all taking notes? Good. Okay. There's an art gallery that I encourage you to visit, and it's called Wilma Jennings Gallery at Kinkillaba. Are you familiar with it? Are y'all familiar with it? You familiar?
Lower Manhattan, right?
Yes, yeah. Wilma Jennings Gallery at Kinkillaba. Not in Harlem. One of our NCA staunch supporters. And Corinne Jennings, the director, has been an inspiration and teaching person for me.
I found that we need to share ourselves in a way that is not frightening to us. Those are the ones that teach us who we are, so that we use the works that we create as a mirror. It's like, look at this. Mm-hmm. This is me, because I'm attracted to it somehow. If you do that often enough, and what I've done through using the internet for a number of years now, I just go to galleries and museums around the world and put a folder and just drop images into it. After a while, you begin to see that you're starting to collect perhaps portraits, perhaps still lifes, perhaps landscapes, and there's certain colors you were attracted to, certain forms you were attracted to. All of those are reflections. And that's what art does. It reflects us back. And it binds us together. And that's, I think it's what I can see here, what we're doing here, is that we're seeing that groups join together to help bind us together. And that is something I think is lacking in a good part of life here. I mean, just look at the news and politics. You want to run away, rather than bringing us together. Right now, at this time, it's breaking us apart. But that itself is a way of saying, okay, I don't agree with that. What can I do about it? How can I record that? What can I change to help move that in a different direction? And that's what we do as artists. We look at the problems and try to find visual solutions to them. And I think that's what we're doing here,
It brings me to an image that my father, he was a painter. He painted since, my birth. And he loved painting family. And one of the paintings that stick in my head is a whole family on a staircase looking down into a dining room area where they're eating. And I don't know whether it's Thanksgiving, but they're having dinner as a family. So that image comes to my mind, connecting to what you said, when you go to online to do for museums and you start to collect these images, and it brings together something about yourself. And I think, with me, with my art, why I love people so much is because of that connection that my father had with people. We would also go to Prospect Park, and he would sit down and paint people. And it was always about being together, people.
Yeah.
So that is
My
definitely
favorite-
my
that's
connection.
my favorite subject, family.
Family, yes.
George talked about collaborations, and the best collaboration that I've ever had was with my wife, creating a family. That, oh my God. She was my girlfriend when I was 14 years old. We've been married 56 years.
Wow.
Talk about collaboration. Okay. Now, let me just say, I'm not an architectural photographer, but I take architectural photography. I do it. Wait, let me back up a little bit. I don't take pictures. I make pictures. Okay? And there's a difference. I'm not a street photographer, but I make street pictures. And for anybody that is into street photography, and I'm into it a lot, okay, I want to share a photographer with you, okay? And I want to share him. I had about 3 or 4 books I was going to bring, and I said no. I kept editing it down to 1 book, okay? But before I share it with you, I'm going to share the name of one that I didn't bring that would have been the second one, okay? And it's Roman Vishniak. Does anyone know him? Roman Vishniak. Vishniac. A Vanished World is the name of the book. Talk about street photography. He was photographing in 1935 in Warsaw. You want to see what it's like to be a fantastic street photographer with all the challenges. Look at his pictures in Warsaw in 1935. Now, this is a photographer that was a friend of mine. Ernest Cole. You ever heard of her? Ernest Cole was a South African photographer, and he photographed apartheid in South Africa. And when he came to Harlem, and I met him, and he showed me this book, I said, "Oh my God!" Not just because of subject matter, but his photography, his skill. And I know what he had to go through to get these pictures, including smuggling the film out of South Africa. House of Bondage. Y'all need to see this book. I told you I only could bring 1 book. This is the book.
And I'm glad you brought that up, not to interrupt you, because I was going to ask all of you, I don't know if I can frame this question clearly, but it seems to me that photography is an elemental form of publishing. More so, I think, than any of the other arts other than music. And do you guys think about publishing your own work, or think about publishing your images? I don't think, I know a lot of photographers, very few of them are making even little books of their work. So is that something that comes to mind as you're photographing?
Kim, you're asking us up here, or
Yes, I'm asking
everybody?
you. No, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I've done several so far.
Okay.
I found that is a wonderful way of getting a body of work that has some cohesion to it, and in an order that says what I want to say. And I've been doing that for a number of years now, and I continue to do that today. Now that we have the digital printing available, we can actually do it online if we need to. I found that that's my way of archiving my body of work. And I've done 7 so far. I have maybe 20 others I can do. Of work I've done, some I've only worked on a year, the body of work. Some bodies of work I've worked on for 40 years. And family is one of those. Street life is another one. Nature is another one. Still lifes is another one. Abstraction is another one. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a way of getting what we've done and giving it over to the world. And I think every photographer who's serious about their work should at least make their own book, so that when I've had a number of friends who passed away, and nobody knows what to do with their body of work. And one day I was out shooting. On my way out, I saw this huge trash bag of slides. Obviously somebody had died, and somebody it was immense. And I said, there's a whole lifetime of work. And I picked a couple up, and I said, oh, these are pretty good. That go to waste. And to me, a life, each life has taken millions of years to get here. And we are individually unique. And it seems to me a sad thing when a life's work vanishes. We're poorer for it. And so I think it's important to record our history. Not only our personal history, but our community's history, our collective history. And that is the power of photography. Photography can take you from 1840 to the present moment. It brings out all sorts of memories, all sorts of ideas. It stimulates the imagination. It's a way of connecting in a timeless manner. It takes the past, the present, and the future, and it combines them. That's the power of photography. I love the medium because every time I go out, it's as if I was given a gift. Say, listen, look at that. And you click on it, and you bring it back, and you share it. And quite often, if you do that often enough, you become better and better at what you do. And you can say more and more in less. And the impact of that on others help us grow. It helps us grow collectively. And that's my 2 cents.
Would you say now that it's easier to preserve a person's body of work since the digital age is more accessible?
I think so.
This is something that George has been kicking me in the butt for years. And I have sat alongside of him, watching him do layouts for his books, right?
Yes,
Okay.
all 3 of us
Okay,
have
so-
worked together for NYPD.
Yeah. Did y'all know that we worked for NYPD? We weren't police officers.
We were civilians.
We were civilian photographers. And we did not, please, get this out of your head that we're shooting crime scenes. Get it out your head. I know you're going there. No. The same way you have a photographer for a CEO of a major corporation photographing for that corporation and for that CEO, that's the kind of work we did, okay? But the impact, now, there are certain assignments and certain photographs that have touched me deeply and have been, well, first of all, the most difficult photo assignment that I did was photographing my grandmother's funeral and my mother's funeral. That was difficult, but I approached it like it was a photo assignment and doing my best so I'd have good stuff to share with the family. Okay. When we were at NYPD, 9/11 hit.
Yes.
Difficult. Photographing police officers' funerals, that hits you hard. One assignment, there were 2 Haitian police officers that were assassinated. And when I went to the wake to photograph, it was so touching. The ceremonial unit was crying.
Wow.
The whole ceremonial unit was crying. We had one police officer that was coming into police headquarters to resign that day. And 9/11 hit. He was almost in the door. He turned around and went to ground zero. I photographed his funeral. There was a police officer that came to this country to study engineering. I photographed his funeral. It's hard. There was a thing called Survivors of the Shield. The survivors, it's a ceremony and an event that was taking place on the Intrepid. Okay? And that was to remember police officers and FBI agents and survivors of the Shield. Hit me hard. And then Christmas time comes around and I'm seeing their kids. I'm photographing their kids on Christmas and I'm seeing them growing up. So,
Sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. You're good.
It is a treat to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Yes, I'm enjoying it.
There was a time when the police commissioner would host children for Halloween. And they would come to the police commissioner's office, special, just to see those kids and whatnot. And I knew that some of them, they were missing their daddies.
I also want to say that photography sometimes, when you're doing an image, is through your tears. And I remember recently, I photographed my mentor dying. And that touched me so deeply because this was a man who was riding motorcycles, driving around, traveling. And then gradually his health started dying. I mean, his health, was worsening. And his wife allowed me to photograph him in the nursing home. And I had to do it through my tears. I mean, tears.
That was heavy.
And and it's not always, in the street happy, you're getting a good picture. But I had to tell the story. I had to show his family that he is this person. He is this photographer. So I photographed him from the beginning, from the time he was in the nursing home. He would sit up, he would talk until he was in the bed and couldn't talk, couldn't eat. And I remember the last time I saw him, I was going on a trip, and I just looked in the room. It was quiet, it was peaceful. And I knew that that would be the last time I saw him. And I have that image of him laying in the bed, not being able to move. So sometimes, a lot of times, we photograph different images through our tears. Another assignment I had, I remember my first assignment with Newsday. It was an assignment of this young boy, 15, him and his girlfriend playing around. He jumps on the car, and I guess the car rolled over him. And I remember Newsday calling me, well, we have an assignment for you. And that's when I really wanted to do daily newspaper work. And it had been my first funeral ever to photograph. And that was touching because you had to show the humanity, you had to show the family, and you just had to show the relationship between him laying in his coffin and the family in mourning. And that was through tears as well. So a lot of assignments that we have is not always happy assignments. Some of them are through tears, but you still have to get the image. You still have to create that moment. You still have to create it in a way that's going to relay the story to your viewing audience.
Yeah, photography is like having a key that allows you to enter different worlds. You know, speaking of the work we did at NYPD, I happened to be on vacation when the World Trade Center came down. My daughter wanted to learn photography. She said, I want to go one day with you and do an assignment. So I said, okay. She calls me up saying, Dad, a plane hit the World Trade Center. I said, okay, let's make this an assignment. So I gave her a camera, and we hit the subway. Subway went up to about 14th Street, and they said, no more service. We got off, and we started walking downtown. She started photographing people listening to the radio, looking at the TV. And I said, well, that's what you do. You know, you record life as it happens. That's what photography's partially about. So finally, we got down to the World Trade Center, and she looks up and she sees it in smoke, and she says, Dad, it's going to come down. I said, no, I don't think so. No sooner do I say that it came down. Finally, she freaked out. I found a subway station that had a phone. She called her mother. Her mother was at St. Vincent. She said, go down there and meet with your mother. She'll be there waiting for you. I went on. One of the things I spent the day. One of the things that struck me and sort of heart-wrenching was that I noticed that things were being thrown out of the window. So I said, I thought it was a chair. It looked like a chair. A photographer was there. He said, yeah, use my lens. Put the lens on, the telephoto. It happened to be a man. They were jumping. I couldn't take a picture.
That's a famous image.
I just couldn't take a picture. I started crying, and I said to myself, this means war. And that image has always affected me in a way that still today sometimes it's hard to talk about.
Yes.
But photography is a gatekeeper to unknown things. And if you're lucky enough and sometimes brave enough to enter. You'll discover things
Good word.
that shows you
Yeah.
who you are.
They coupled us up, with FBI agents
Yes.
to photograph Ground Zero. Okay? And I'm photographing Ground Zero. The FBI agent next to me has a clipboard with a pen, and he's writing down, because we're talking about film,
Yes.
he's writing down the description of every frame that I take a picture of. Then I take the film out the camera and give it to him. NYPD couldn't even process that film. FBI had to process it. I said to him, "What are you going to do with the film?"
Dude, I need that. Yeah, some money for it.
Well, his answer was,
Wow.
"It's going to be part of the international court case."
That never happened. Somebody should take your film.
You mentioned digital. We're in a digital age. Can I touch on that for a minute? What's the best camera? I'm a Nikon guy. But, as I told George, I just switched up to Fuji. Okay? I just switched up to Fuji. What's the best camera? Who said Samsung? Samsung? Who?
Come on, we know. We know the answer.
Tell them.
The camera in your hands.
The camera that you have with you.
Right.
Whether it's your phone,
Right.
a
The best camera is
Polaroid.
the camera you have with you. So if it's that cell phone, a Nikon, a Canon, or whatever,
Sony.
the best camera is the one you have with you.
It's never the camera.
It's right.
Because I hear people say, oh, that camera takes good pictures. I'm like, no, this camera takes horrible pictures. I said, it's the photographer. It's the person behind the camera. It's the eye. It is what we see that makes the image good. Not the camera. The camera is just the tools that we use to get that image. Like a carpenter, they need their screwdriver, but they need their hand to turn that screwdriver.
And I can vouch for that because I am a carpenter. And you have to do that. You have to have the right tool for the right job. And photography is the one that lets everybody see what they never would have seen.
Tell them what else you are other than a carpenter.
No. I'm just in presence of
One of your former colleagues, Carp, always said it's a poor musician that blames his instrument.
I like that.
I like that.
You, just sitting here is one of the best things I've ever heard. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. As artists, do you find that if you're, let's say you had a family member die, does that affect your work and how you see what it is you're taking? Do you have to then kind of go into a disciplined kind of mentality in order to continue working? Or do you find like these moments that find you in that time frame? Like, do you have to do a state of meditation or get back into a state of alignment in order to do good work?
Just be professional.
Yeah, and
Just fall back on what you know and what you've done, what you've learned and how you do it. You photograph enough weddings, you know all the setups. You know the rings, the cake, the da. You deal with the funerals, you know the shots.
you have to fall
But do
back
it with
into-
passion.
Yes, and you have to fall back into yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to take a step back. Yes, it's a family member who has passed, but you have to take a step back and say, I have to tell the story. Okay? You don't want to fall apart crying and everything. You got to step back and you have to take 10 deep breaths and say, I have to tell the story so the family will know 10, 20 years from now, how this person lived, how they died, how they communicated with family. And it's sad, yeah, you're gonna do it through your tears, but you gotta take a step back in order to do the image taking.
Can I just tell you a similarity of a wedding and a funeral in terms of photographing? I photographed a police officer's funeral. And I went to the family, I went to his grandmother, and I made it clear to her, I'm photographing for you and the family, not NYPD. We're just the instrument, we're putting it together, but I'm photographing it for them. So if there's something that you want me to photograph, I'll take care of it. So the same way I would deal with those setups at that wedding, I'm dealing with it at that funeral. The Greek Orthodox priest or whatever his office was came to me and he said, "Oh, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Grandma," she was in tears, "thank you." Because seeing me work and what I was doing and whatnot, and she knew that I was photographing for her. That's the same way I photographed my grandmother's funeral and my mother's funeral. I was photographing it for my family. And so, as touched as I was, and as difficult as it was going to do the best photographic job that I could do. And I knew, and what made it easier is because I knew all the players, so I knew Aunt Evelyn with so-and-so, and Grandma with so-and-so, and so, you know. So I did a course with Lizette Modell at the New School. You know her? You know her? Or you knew her work?
I know her work.
Okay. First day in the classroom. Now I'm thinking, okay, because I know her work. Woof! Powerful, powerful. I'm going to find out how she does it. And you know what she said? The first day, she made it clear, we are not going to be talking about anything technical. We're not going to be talking about depth of field and composition and compositions and none of that. So what did she talk about? She talked about your intent, what you're taking pictures of, why you're taking pictures. What is your intent? So you've heard us talk about what our intent is. So we've learned technical skills of photography, but it's about what our intent is. We want to present our community, our family in a certain light. Back in the day, talk before photography, when it was all about painters and sculptors and the artists that were telling the stories were the ones that were dealing with the tapestries. And you go to church and the tapestries were telling the Bible stories because the population, the people were illiterate. So they were learning the Bible stories from the images on the tapestries. At one time, the way well, at least black people, the way we passed on the family story was in the Bible. We would write down the names of the people in the Bible and so on and pass it on. Now, I said, now we got a new tool to tell family story, photography. So my grandfather was 96 years old when he passed. He was a farmer on the family farm in Virginia. And when he left the family farm, he went to West Virginia and worked in the coal mine. And when he left the coal mine in West Virginia, he came to Harlem and he worked on the coal truck. It was my honor to use my skills to photograph my grandfather. And then George and I went through a program called CEDA, and I learned video production. And then I went to NBC in Albany, New York, and was a broadcast journalist and did video. And when I left there, I came home and I videotaped my grandfather. It's about you telling your family story. That's the first. That's the first. Your family story.
Your family story is my family story.
Y'all didn't know that. He's my brother from another mother. Yes.
That's true. I think it's very important for us to know our personal history, where our family came from, generational genealogy, as well as where we all come from, where he came from, where she came from, we came. That helps me find my place. And then we look at it overall. Where does this nation come from? You know, that is part of our story as well. And photography is a way of segmenting those stories and working on them individually. So when we look at our bodies of work, you can read his story and our story at the same time. And then vice versa. You can read my story, which is unique to me, as well as his story, because he has family, he has children, he has grandchildren. Those things are things that influence us. It's the books we read, the music we listen to, all of these things. It's all one life, you know? And when you look at it that way, then there's no reason to look at ourselves as separate. Basically, we're all more like liquid. We all melt into each other. And that's what I think I do. I like thinking of my photography as a way of recording our evolution as it changes from day to day. And the photographs I take today will never be repeated, will never look the same, because we'll have different mindsets, we have different clothing, we eat different food from anybody who went before us. And it'll be different from those who follow us. So the uniqueness of photography is that it freezes time. It freezes time and space for us to reflect back on it. And when we do that, quite often we're flooded with memories. You know, so you may look at this picture here, and it may remind you of your vacation. While it'll remind me of my vacation and who I was, so that everything is a reflection.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Please, yeah, you got a captive audience. I'm sorry.
I don't want to cut the party short now, but we have an opening reception that's scheduled to start at 4 p.m. at the Children's Art Carnival.
Okay.
We have to go.
Yeah,
Which is in
we
10
gotta start.
minutes, so we might have to cut the conversation, but I think we've got time for one little bit left. Oh, it's 2 minutes? Maybe that was a line.
We went a little over, but that's kind of hard
Go
to
ahead,
stop the
make
comment.
it quick.
Make it quick.
A short version.
Okay. I was photographing Dr. Betty Shabazz. And so my thought process, okay, I'm going to photograph Dr. Betty Shabazz. How am I going to handle this? And I came up with, well, I'm going to take my wife with me. Because first of all, I'm going to need a buffer, and, to ease into that and to deal with that, because that's heavy. Dr. Betty Shabazz, oh my God. So my wife went with me, and I'm doing the setup, and my wife is over there in the corner talking to Dr. Betty Shabazz. And next thing I know, Dr. Betty Shabazz starts crying. And to this day, I don't know why she was crying. Because I know what lane to stay in. And if these two black women are talking privately like that, I'm not going to get involved. But let me just say this. But that's true. That's true. Matter of fact, the photograph that I took of her, they have a mural-sized print of it at the Audubon. So if you go upstairs and you see that picture, that's the picture I took of her during that session. Okay.
Just have a piece of paper. Here it is. Wow. That was exactly what we kind of thought about when we had this initial thought, right? Aptly titled Harlem Legacies and Artist Communities, a panel discussion. Right. Please give it up. Please. I want to hear a lot of hands. Lenore, Salimah, Ed, George, and Foco staff, right? And Foco friends, supporters, you guys for coming out. Thank you guys. Kim, thank you for hosting us. I know you're back there. Please give it up for Kim. Michael, we're going to go check out Children's Art Carnival. Please thank them as well, because we're going to get access to them. Find us in foco.org, right? Talk to us. We're all here. Get your autographs before they leave, right? Get some water, because it's warm outside. And again, thank you guys. Really, deep honor. Pleasure having you guys here today. Thank you so much.